Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 3 of This Week in Thought. It's a Saturday night now. It's January 7th, 2023. And it's actually, we got episode 2 up pretty quick. We did episode 2 just about 5 days ago. Posted a couple days ago. Hopefully you got a chance to see it. If not, go check it out. We're putting them all in a playlist called Season 1, at least for the first season, which I'm guessing will be 2023. So you can watch them all in order if you're interested. I think this week, or this episode rather, we're going to talk about, I think we're talking about consciousness. Seems to be kind of the thing that we wanted to sort of follow up on from last couple discussions. We sort of started to touch on it a little bit. And I don't know if we know exactly where we're going to go with the discussion. I think we're going to start just by talking about, what is consciousness? What do we mean by that? Excuse me. What do we think that means? And then what's the value behind it? Is there value behind it? I don't know. What do you got? You got any initial thoughts? You think there's a?
Yeah. It's I think it's one of those things that's important to talk about, considering it's the baseline kind of existence, and this is kind of it's like the placebo effect. It's kind of just glossed over.
I think you're right. I hope you've got some starting ideas or starting definition, or maybe you can begin to lay out what that baseline is, at least in your estimation.
Yeah, I see it. I don't even. What would be the difference between consciousness and awareness?
Well, I guess in my mind, when I think of consciousness, I think of a simulation created typically in the mind, created in the brain of a human. And it's a simulation of the environment that the human thinks that it's in. And the simulation includes a sense of self within that simulation. And again, in discussions you and I have had before, there was a term I remember you used, and it was called perspectival designation, which is the identity of... It's an identity of a person within his or her consciousness.
Like spark of consciousness, or
yeah, it's the thing that makes you say, "Oh, this is the part of my model of the universe that represents me," and I equate it with myself.
And would that be the awareness then?
Well, when you say the word awareness, like when I hear the word awareness, I think of awareness as just like the on state. If consciousness had an on-off switch, and if it's in the on state, I would say it's in a state of awareness. Whereas, let's say when you go to sleep, it's in the off state. Awareness is in the off state, and it's in the simulation state, like the I say simulation, I'm using it two different ways. So in the first way, I'm saying that consciousness in my interpretation is a simulation based upon all of the external input as well as the internal input that senses are providing to the brain. Whereas,
like a mental construct, maybe?
Yes, definitely a mental construct, a mental model of the world around the person that's constantly updated as new information is coming in through the senses. Whereas awareness is more like the awake state, and when you go to sleep, you turn off awareness, and so the brain is forced to create bullshit, which is what dreams are, and I think it makes up those dreams that like, let's say, false reality of a dream, using bits and pieces of prior, like memories it had of prior experiences, and then assembles them into, these like, what would you call them, like farcical tales, like delusions, I guess you'd say, is what a dream is.
How would you classify like lucid dreaming in that? Have you ever had an experience?
I think I have. Can you kind of give a definition, or like what you mean when you say that term?
Being able to gain awareness during dream state.
So that's interesting. So it's like you're in the unaware state, and you're able to flip enough of the consciousness on to go aware while you're still in the bullshit, like false reality, like the simulated reality. Yeah, a couple times I think I did that. And I don't know that I did it by intent. It was more like by accident. Like I accidentally realized that it was a bullshit state. It was a dream state. And so I was like, oh, well, since it's crap, I think I can do things like I think I can defy the laws of physics in this game world, let's say, which is what I think of a dream as. And so when I'm able to do that, typically the thing I try to do is I go for flight, because that's my favorite activity to undertake in a dream state. And it's not like I'm flapping my wings. I just sort of lean forward and I take off slowly.
Yeah. I throw in a little bit of counterclockwise spiral as I'm hopping like that to take flight, but I think that's just...
I got to remember that.
A mental... I think that everybody has their own little mental tricks to do stuff, because so you're saying you believe you're just taking control of the simulation a little bit. Your mental construct.
And not the simulation based on awareness of the surrounding, the simulation based on whatever my subconscious mind has dreamed up for my little game world that night.
Sure, your mental construct, kind of. It's kind of...
a pure synthetic construct as opposed to a construct based upon external inputs. It's a construct based on memories, like generated reality based on memories.
Kind of like it's going to sleep as well. It's in offline mode as well.
Yeah, sort of. So, what was the term you said you called that? Lucid dreaming, which is when you gain the awareness state during the non-aware state?
Yes.
Yeah, I've had it a few times. Not a lot. No, that's not true. I mean, I would say maybe 1 out of every 20 or 30 dreams I have, I go into that state. But I don't dream very often. Or I don't remember my dreams, I should say. They're not memorable enough.
And my dreams are all narrative-based. Although it's not narrative involving me. It's usually me playing a character.
Are your dreams generally what you would consider pleasant or unpleasant?
Unpleasant. Well, with conflict.
Yes!
So.
Mine too. And I used to just think that there were only 2 categories of dreams, pleasant dreams and nightmares. But I would have to say that nightmare is too broad of a category, and it has too many negative connotations. Because I have dreams that are more what I would call stress dreams, that they're not scary enough to be called nightmares, but it's largely revolves around these weird false narratives of school or work paradigms in which I'm behind schedule, I haven't completed a task, there's like a looming deadline, and I'm totally unprepared for it. And so it puts me in a state of anxiety and stress and worry and negative anticipation of what's coming, but it's not like terrifying. So I don't know if you call that a nightmare or what you call it, but that's usually what I have. Those are like my typical dreams that I remember.
I wonder if you could use lucid dreaming to go into those dreams and gray them out. There's a technique where you can take a memory, like a memory of in color in a picture, and transform it into from a color to a black and white image. And as you do that, you draw the energy you've put into it back into yourself.
That's interesting.
As a technique too, because you invest a lot of energy in some memories, and it's getting some of that back.
I don't know how to say this. I don't consciously or intentionally induce the lucid dreaming state. That's more like a gift that happens, and it happens at seemingly random. Just rarely do I all of a sudden seem like, oh, I'm aware that I'm in a dream state, but yet I'm remaining in the dream state. I'm not waking up. And those are the chances that I have to do things like flight or violate the law of physics in my dream.
For my understanding, practice with that makes it more accessible.
I mean, practice. How can you induce something that isn't self-induced, isn't intentionally induced?
It's you. One of the techniques is your hand. Throughout the day, you about 10 or 20 times a day, just sort of semi-randomly, you look at your hands and go, "Is this a dream? Is this a dream?" And you do it so much that the habit, after you build the habit up, after I don't know however long it takes to build a habit, 2-3 weeks, in your dreams you'll look down at your hands and you'll go, "Is this a dream?" And then that's what the trigger you're paying attention to.
I'll tell you.
Oh, I am in a dream.
That is really interesting, but it's going to sound weird. I don't put any value in my dreams, even those lucid dreams, enough to compel me to want to get good at inducing the lucid dreaming state. I think I just treat them as it's almost like a game simulation that my brain goes through as part of the R&R process necessary for me to be able to cope with the next batch of reality that I have to deal with when I get up. It's almost like a garbled state. It's almost like a video game system where you go to put in a cartridge in an old video game system and it gets into like a garbled state, and you're like, oh, I need to clean the cartridge, or I need to. I look at that's what dreams are to me. It's like that sort of garbled state till I get things cleaned out.
And I think it definitely is that. I also think that it's a method that your subconscious can communicate. The communication method between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is terrible.
Sure, sure.
And that's kind of one of the reasons why I like symbology, is because I'm trying to teach the subconscious a common language to better facilitate communication. A harmonious, a more harmonious existence.
See, now this is interesting to me. What's interesting to me is you say you're attempting to develop a technique whereby I think you put your conscious mind in more direct communication with your subconscious mind.
Yes.
But let's say, for example, that you achieve that. Let's just assume that after time and working on that, you achieve it, and you establish perfect communication between your conscious and subconscious mind. What then? What's the value of that, or what do you gain from that?
Eventually, peace.
Ah, okay.
Because eventually, I like for me, I would work towards teaching my body to be in a calm state as its base state instead of an anxiety state.
So you think the subconscious part of your mind is what is generating a lot of anxiety for you, and you want to get in touch with it so you can tame it?
Yes, because I think like if you get thought loops, that feeds it too. But I think a lot of it is that system, the subconscious system.
Do you ever try to deal with your anxiety just at the conscious level by changing your response to stress-inducing events and activities?
It works while I'm doing it, and as soon as I pay attention to something else, it comes back. So
wow, to the unaware listener to this, they probably think, oh, this guy Kosick is like wired for stress. But I'll tell you, I don't think you're wired for it like genetically. I think you've been programmed experientially and behaviorally by your early influences to be in that default stress mode as a way to respond to things around you.
Well, and epigenetically as well, which can stress can move multiple generations through the epigenetic system.
Crazy.
So hopefully they'll make a pill that'll just turn all of that to the optimum states, But yeah, epigenetics is a really interesting field because of the fact that some of those traits move in between generations. It doesn't matter like how the inheritor is treated; they're still predisposed.
Yeah, and I mean, so again, let's say you determine conclusively that the source of your anxiety is epigenetic. I mean, the only benefit there is what? That you could place the blame on an ancestor who had the behavior that was transferred epigenetically to you. But that doesn't do anything to solve the problem, which is the symptom of anxiety. And it sounds like the only way you're trying to solve that is through establishing communication with your subconscious, because you think a lot of the triggers are rooted in the subconscious.
Yes. Yeah.
But I wonder how much of it is just, can it be dealt with on a conscious level by changing the way you respond to the stressors? Like the way you interpret the stressors and their influence they have on you.
Sure, like cognitive psychology or...
Sure, I'm trying to think of like things that you would stress about. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, a thing I stress about a lot is work. I would say the main thing I stress about is work. Is that true for you also?
It's kind of just generalized. Anything.
Oh, wow. So like just like, is it like interacting with people, or is it like what are the triggers? Like you read the news and that causes it, or social, like you go and social anxiety, like you go into a group and that causes it, or
many things.
Oh wow, okay. Are the things I mentioned in the mix somewhere there?
Yes.
Oh wow, okay. Does it help at all when you think about the ultimate meaninglessness of everything? Like, do you ever go, the omega point's going to get us whether I stress or not?
Actually, to me, I think that there's something beyond the cycle, so I focus on that. And I just recently, in that mindset, like we're an eternal pilgrim through this world. We're just, this is temporary. There is something eternal. I think that there's probably a part of me outside of the loop watching things happen as it's already occurred. So I think to me, the idea that this has already happened in this time bubble, from outside the time bubble, helps me. All the worrying doesn't really make a difference. It's just already done.
Without delving more into metaphysics, because I think it's all speculative, but I'm curious as to what you think exists outside of the time bubble, as you put it. What part of you do you think persists?
I don't think we can perceive outside of the bubble. So it's hard to say. Might be nothing.
Yeah. Is it?
Although I'm fine with the nothing part.
Yeah.
If that's how it is, that's fine. It's not going to change how I live.
Well, anyway, back to the awareness or consciousness.
Yeah, but I like the idea of when you make a mental construct, your sense of self is part of that mental construct.
Well, it has to be. It has to be. I mean, otherwise your simulation wouldn't be useful to you, because you'd have a third person view of everything, and it would make it impossible for you to control your own body, because you wouldn't know what part your body plays in its relation to its environment. So your mental model of the reality has to include a part of it that is identified with what you think is the self. It's got to have that perspectival designation, or it couldn't do anything.
Yeah. And I wonder how do other people come into that idea? Are they like?
Yeah.
How much do you think over the past couple of years I've been thinking about virtual solipsism, where there might be an objective world, but I think one can become so wrapped up in one's biases, and your mental construct and reality can go further apart, or one.
Yes, I think that's true.
And I think at some point, some people are operating on the mode where they're mostly in their own mental construct. They don't really interact with others in a direct way. They're mostly interacting with their own image, their ghosts that they superimpose over people. I was wondering just kind of what your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm thinking about that. I think you're right. I mean, how do I say this? Even if we try to take an objective viewpoint here, the nature of consciousness is that it's just a mental simulation that a given person has of the collection of all their perceptions being fed to them by their senses, and it includes an identification of self, which is their perspectival designation. So really, when you've got two people talking, person A and person B, the closest analog that person A has of person B's actual identity is just their mental construct of them. Hopefully it's fed to them by their senses, but I mean, there's no way to determine whether it couldn't be, there couldn't be a solipsistic analog that would explain it away just as easily. In other words, if person B is external of the mind of person A, which they are, then they just appear as an object in person A's mental construct of the universe in their consciousness. So when person A thinks that person B is talking to them, person A really has no way to know whether it's actually this external entity called person B that was making the sounds that they were perceiving, or whether they just dreamed up this object and called it person B, and then imagined that it was saying some shit, again, all generated within their brain, but the way it was generated, they believed it was from external stimuli.
Sure. And you really can't,
Right.
But I think it's more of a spectrum. I think you can view other people like from the sense data they put out more, as opposed to being more of a. I think you can train your mental construct to take in more sense data and use that more, as opposed to your own biases.
Sure.
Ego mind.
Sure. Again, what's the end game? What's the reason for that? Let's say you could do that. What's the value that you get from that?
I think people learn better in a collaborative setting. I think society functions better with more input.
Right, but the thing about solipsism is, even if I get as much input as I possibly could from the other members of society, I have no way to know whether or not they actually exist as independent people out in the universe, or whether they're all just mental constructs, meaning it's just me getting in touch with other parts of my split personality.
But that doesn't necessarily negate the value of what the sliver is saying.
No, but to have a better understanding of whether or not the objective reality exists, which is I think what you're going after based upon trying to get more sense data and integrating more sense data, is never going to give you certainty about whether there's objective reality external to the person or whether that's just a solipsistic universe.
Well, that's true, but I'll just, make an assumption and go off of that there is an objective world.
And I do the same thing. I don't know whether or not there's an external world. I just assume that there is, and I operate accordingly.
Although, in all truth, if it was solipsistic, I wouldn't really change how I behave. So,
yeah, I don't think I would either. So that's why I don't really care whether there's an external reality or it's all just a solipsistic construct. It doesn't matter to me.
I want.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, it sounded like what you were trying to do, though, was to increase sense awareness, to have a better understanding of the things that are apparently external, like the views of other people.
Sure. I'd rather have that, because I think that different opinions are valuable.
Yeah.
And I would imagine they would be more different if it was from the outside.
Sure, but there's no way to know, meaning anything could still be consistent with a solipsistic view of reality, in which case those opinions that you think are external really are not. It's just other voices in your mind.
Yeah, at least it's another separation of degree at worst.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it's kind of interesting. If we just take a step back and say, well, let's, for the sake of argument, assume that there is an external reality, and that when we think we're having a conversation, we actually are having a conversation with other people. At least in under that assumption, yeah, there might be value in getting the opinions of other people. I guess for no other reason, then at least you can learn things faster because you could learn from their experiences. Is the benefit, I would think, of communicating well with other people.
Well, you can learn from good examples and bad examples.
Yes.
You can go,
true.
That is not a good argument. I will not use that.
Right. Right. God, you ever think back in your life and you go, was I shaped more by, in retrospect, what was a good example of behavior, or bad examples that I recoiled from and subsequently navigated away from in my life? Like, I wonder. I'm starting to think maybe I was shaped more by running away from bad examples than from running toward good examples.
It could, and to me, it's a mix.
Well, sure, it's a mix, but I'm saying, was there more of the positive or more of the negative?
Probably negative, because I really rebelled against consumer culture.
I'm starting to think maybe this is a generational thing. As we talked a little bit about being Gen Xers, and it's a latchkey generation. That's like what it's known as. If you go look up, well, what defines Gen X, and what we mean by latchkey is basically the supposed parental figures gave such little crap about us that they said, well, here's a latchkey, go let yourself in and raise yourself after school while I'm off at work or living my adult life. So like immediately from the foundational examples that we got bad examples of how to raise your kids, which is to leave them to their own devices. And so I wonder if maybe that's a common thing among Gen Xers. We go, man, I was shaped a lot by some negative examples, and then doing my best to avoid those and repeating those mistakes.
And I think we're willing to talk about the negative examples, whereas the previous generations kind of didn't. They put the whole thing was kind of a gilded turd.
Yeah.
We don't talk about all that.
Yeah.
When to me, it's always been the opposite. If everybody's miserable, get together, say, yeah, we're miserable. This is a terrible system. Let's get together and
now,
rebuild it.
See, I agree completely with you, but I wonder, again, is that just the Gen X attitude, the Gen X approach? Which is very pragmatic. It's very much like, hey, get it done, and I don't care whose feelings get hurt, and I don't care what the protocols are. We're just going to throw that shit away, and we're going to move toward the solution. That's a real Gen X-y way to do things, I think. I don't know if the other generations like that approach. Not that they're necessarily right. I mean, I tend to think we're right. Of course I think we're right. I'm part of that group, and I agree with you. I bet if you surveyed a lot of Gen Xers, they'd be like, yeah, forget protocol, forget all that shit.
Yep.
Cut to the chase and build a solution.
Yep, fix it.
Fix it, yeah, fix it is right. So when you talk about, would I like to? I don't remember how you phrased it, but something like improve communication with other people, maybe to expedite understanding or learn faster, or something like that.
Yeah, of a greater understanding.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I don't know that there's other people beyond like those that are like-minded thinkers, like other Gen Xers I like to learn from. Them other generations, man, I don't know. They got some serious. I look at them as my negative examples for what not to do.
Yeah, but there's individuals. It's like-minded individuals, or go across boundaries because there's a bunch of younger people doing good work now.
There are a few. There are a few boomers that I learned some things from that I appreciate.
And it's nowadays it's so much easier to have a voice.
Sure.
They're still gatekeepers, but they're a lot less powerful.
Sure.
Now.
Sure.
I mean, I really don't want to look up like what percentage of people trust the nightly news at this point.
Yeah.
But when
not only that, but I wonder what percentage of people even watch nightly news. I think the younger generation, like even Gen X on down, that's a construct of a prior era, like a bygone era. I haven't watched like broadcast news in decades. I don't know. Like I get my news online on demand, and I go from sources that I trust.
Yes, and I think that it's the lack of trust in the institutions is going to come back and bite the institutions in the tail.
Well, maybe, but that's fine. I mean, who cares about an institution? I don't care about institutions.
I think largely because the institutions have behaved in a terrible manner. They've lost it. They've lost it by behaving terribly, and the way to get it back is to not be criminals.
Well, yeah, criminals. I don't know.
Well,
I get what you're saying, but that's a loaded word too.
Corruption, graft.
Sure. Sure.
Run things more efficiently, maybe.
Sure. I don't even. I know there's a lot of corruption around. Well, I don't know. I assume there's a lot of corruption around. There seems to be, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking or worrying about it. I'm more interested in how do I build a solution.
Yes.
I don't even. The people that are corrupt are going to be corrupt, and I don't. I just find a solution around them. I don't even worry about them.
And I think find a solution around them is why I pay attention to it, because I don't think that it's just inertia that's stopping Starfleet from happening. I think that they're people who are making money on things being terrible, and who are willing to spend money to keep it terrible.
I know what you're saying, but it's that I don't know that the ultra cynical conspiracy theory minded approach is helpful, because it seems like you can quickly go down a spiral where you start to see conspiracies everywhere. And yeah, maybe there are, but just because you've identified them doesn't thwart them. It doesn't allow you to work around them. I don't know. I don't.
See, I think identifying them hopefully will help move around them. It may not.
Yeah. If you're building solutions that are based around like circumventing those things. But if you're not, if you're just like spending all your time looking for conspiracies everywhere, it seems like you could get it down a spiral, like a rabbit hole of analysis paralysis, where you go, everything is corrupt and everybody's got nefarious intent. It's like, well,
yes,
okay, but so what? I mean,
I think they call that taking the black pill or black pilling or.
Well, that's not interesting to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I would much, and I spend more time thinking about gardening and growing my own food and
good.
Because I think that's more of a better solution is for people to go away, go out into the woods, have everything filmed. Here's how we're living.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you gotta show the middle class that there's a better way of doing it.
Yeah, middle class. You gotta show everybody. You gotta show everybody.
Oh, sure.
Show everybody a better way. Teach by example.
But the rich people probably aren't going to do that. Some will.
It's up to them whether they do it or not. I mean, I kind of look at it like set the good example, and then let the chips fall where they may. Let whoever's willing to learn from it learn from it. I wonder though, because like I'm trying to connect what we're talking about with what you said before about how it sounded like you said, well, there was a lot of different like sources of anxiety in your day-to-day experiences,
sure, yeah.
and I just wonder how much of that is tied up with that very skeptical, cynical worldview. Not that a certain amount of skepticism is healthy and necessary, and I think it is.
Right.
But if it gets excessive, I wonder if that can lead to the downward spiral of I see conspiracies everywhere, and so I'm paranoid and I'm always stressed.
Sure, and it absolutely can. And if you're prone to that, you should look at it in little tiny bites.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is it sounds like you might be prone to it.
I think paying attention to the news, I still think it's important. Just because the governments deal with colossal forces, so I at least want 40-minute heads up. They decide to do something stupid.
Yeah. If they decide to do something stupid, I don't know if 40 minutes is enough heads up to give you a chance. But hey, whatever makes you feel comfortable.
Just enough to, I can go sit on a rock or something and just watch, a last sunset if it's around that time. Or, just, I was here, soon this will be gone. I just don't want it to be, I just don't want the end to be, oh,
That's interesting. I think we talked about this in a prior episode, and we could talk more about it. But for me, there's two priorities I think for humanity. The first is clean up the atmosphere, large-scale atmospheric scrubbers, and then export that technology for free to the world. I think is the way to do that. And then the second one is become multiplanetary, so that we don't have a comet wipe us out like the dinosaurs. And so to me, it's like, well, the solution to both of those is tied up in funding. Like I feel like there's a will, but there's not a strong enough will. In other words, there's a stronger will that says, well, economics are a bigger priority, and we need to distribute the, let's say, the available tax dollars in a different way to things that are more important. And I look at it and go, well, it's just a matter of shifting priorities. I would say number one is environment, number two is space exploration, but more like colonization. So fix the environment, colonize space would be my two priorities as if I was setting the agenda, let's say, for how to spend tax dollars.
And I think another good part of the space program is, you get your Velcro and your tang, but you also get... I'm like, your Velcro and your tag. By the way, for those, it's possible that younger viewers don't get that reference. Velcro, that was invented for NASA, right? Because they needed a way to have adhesive that was reusable adhesive under zero gravity environment. And then tang is what? Powdered fake orange juice, citrus juice. Juice.
It's for use so they could send it dehydrated, and then they could reconstitute it by hydrating it in space to give nutrients to the astronauts, right?
Yeah.
All
small. All that technology can be used,
and a lot more. By the way, kids, those who aren't aware, go look up all the things that the space program has given you in your day-to-day life. It will shock you how much of modern convenience came from research for NASA decades ago.
I'm all for research. I think there's a lot of moving around in the budget that could be done to give money to research.
I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, boy, I don't want to necessarily get on the political proselytization bandwagon here of like what we think the priorities should be, but I mean, fix the environment and colonize space. I would leave it at that.
We could use a lot of the habitation technology to go underwater.
Sure. Atlantis style, like in Aquaman, how it's all domes.
Seabed mining, or however you want to do it. Aquaculture.
Yeah, very interesting. I don't know. I like the idea of subterranean cities on other celestial bodies. Like they're looking a lot for like lava tubes on the moon and Mars as a way to where if you just go underground and you build your structure under there, the radiation in micrometeoroids, which are a real problem in celestial bodies that don't have a lot of atmosphere to burn that stuff up, and to reflect it like the radiation, the next best thing is earth or soil, like regolith. So
Sure.
you can either move it and build up mounds around whatever structures you've got, which is one way to do it. The other way is just go find the lava tubes and then essentially build your cities underground, which I think is really cool. I hope they do that. I hope they get robots starting to do that soon on Moon, especially.
Well, just imagine Venus.
I was watching something about terraforming Venus. By the way, on YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube. Man, there's some stuff. I want to say there's a channel called Kurzgesagt. You ever watch any Kurzgesagt videos? Kurzgesagt, it's like science type videos, and they talk about a lot of hypotheticals. So they'll talk about how do you terraform this planet, hypothetically, or this planet. And Venus was one that they did, and it blew my mind when they were talking about how you could essentially re-engineer Venus to be livable. Just because its gravitic conditions, because of its size, are so much closer to Earth than, let's say, Mars, which has just only like 60 or 70% of the gravity. So Venus is the one where if you could re-engineer completely its climate, it would be like the twin Earth. It's really interesting. Check out the Kurzgesagt. I mean, you, Cossack, obviously, please do.
Yeah.
But people on the internet that are watching us, if you're interested in that, and you like what Cossack's talking about terraforming Venus, go watch the Kurzgesagt video on it. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I mean they talk about touching down on Venus like in the same terms as like touching the surface of the sun. I mean, if you could build underground, you could capture all that electricity, or like Mercury. You could cover the hot side of Mercury with solar panels and just microwave beam them I don't know what the rotation would be, but once the rotation window opens, beam energy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they do that when they start building in orbit.
Yeah, relay stations, relay satellites. I mean, that I think is the key. And I got to think, by the way, energy transfer is awesome, especially if we could do that over long distances within the solar system would be great. But just the first thing is, I hope that, and I should just do the research to see if they're doing it, I hope the space agencies are working on building a communication relay network through a series of satellites around all the celestial bodies in the solar system, like the Moon and Mars. I hope they're putting communication satellites around them so that you can start having conversations. And I know there's a lag the farther away you get. Like Mars is like a several minute lag, I think, but the Moon is like a second and a half it takes for a signal to get to the Moon.
Hopefully they can do something where they use like entangled particles, like sort of a quantum effect, like put one in a ship, take it out to Mars. If they're as long as they keep their connection, you jiggle this one, use it like a telegraph.
Right.
You can turn it off and on. You get binary, and I think they said information travels at 40 times the speed of light. I think.
Oh wow.
If it in between entangled particles.
Wild.
So it would help.
Wild.
But
Yeah.
I think the quantum computing is going to make a lot of things different.
Yeah. Was that an article you sent me not that long ago where they were talking about communication with, and it wasn't actual, but it was like they had set up virtual quantum entangled particles in a simulation. Yeah. And they were able to achieve that type of what you're talking about, like telegraph style binary communication. It's just interesting.
Oh yeah. There's always ways to cheat.
Oh right. Oh yeah, quantum mechanics is incredible. I mean, yeah, you're totally right. That's a great area of research, especially. Man, if they could unlock faster than light communication, that's another game changer. Like.
Yeah, it would be a game changer. That, and if we could figure out how to make an artificial EM field around a ship.
Right.
Because long term, having kids out there is supposed to be difficult.
Yep.
But yeah, if you could do a lot more with robot stuff if you could get that instantaneous communication.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm glad you mentioned robots because it's occurring to me that we're almost 45 minutes into our conversation, and we started talking about consciousness, which is great, but there was a part of it that we didn't talk about earlier, and I want to talk a little bit about it now, which is we tend to think of consciousness in human terms. Like, I think most people you talk to, whatever their definition is, they sort of restrict consciousness to being an activity done by the brain of a human. And I agree with that. That's fine. There's some debate as to whether or not, let's say, other animal forms other than humans have consciousnesses. Like dogs, let's say, for example. Do they have like a stripped down version where they don't have the depth of complexity of thought, or maybe the level of self-reflection that humans do? And it seems to be proportional to the size of the neocortex that the animal has. The huge neocortex that the human has allows for the very complex and abstract thought and self-reflection, presumably, that are typical earmarks of what humans denote as consciousness. But I gotta say, what if we build machines here, and it's plausible now, I would say within a decade or two, we're going to have machines that have not only the complexity of computation comparable or greater than what humans do, but it's likely, I think, that we're going to create simulations either through essentially imaging and reverse engineering human consciousness, or through something like the research that Jeff Hawkins' team at that company Numenta are doing, where they're using, I think he calls it the memory prediction framework theory of cognition, I think is what he calls it. Again, I don't want to go into all the details because I'm sure I'm going to get it wrong, but for those that are interested, go look up Jeff Hawkins and Numenta and the research that they're doing on essentially building algorithms to mirror the way the neocortex works. So let's say we get to that here in another decade or two, and we've essentially built machines that have consciousness, albeit on a silicon-based hardware instead of a carbon-based hardware, but that produces a comparable simulation, mental simulation of reality with the notion of self within it, just like the perspectival designation, except it's running on silicon. So now we've got essentially a consciousness in a machine, a synthetic consciousness in a machine. And the thing I really want to talk about, Kasich, I really would like to get your take on this, is do we think there's any reason to make a distinction in terms of the value we assign to a silicon-based consciousness versus a carbon-based consciousness, if in fact they're producing comparable simulations?
If they were making comparable simulations, but I would wonder, awareness, I've been sort of separating from consciousness. So to me, consciousness would be, making a mental construct with yourself in it, whereas awareness would be being aware, which I know but being aware in that simulation.
Knowledge of the fact of the simulation from your perspectival designation within the simulation.
And isn't awareness even more just...
What is it?
It's so difficult to describe. It's just, it is what it is what it is. It's, and I don't know. I think you can have, with AIs, I think you can have awareness. Maybe, I'm sorry, you can have consciousness without awareness.
Possibly.
Which I think is what but I think you can have the full deal.
I think you can have the full deal too.
Both together, I think, are important.
For the sake of my argument,
it may just be selfish because I, have the awareness, so I value it. But
for the sake of my argument, and to fulfill the important distinction I think you just made, which is separating consciousness from awareness and saying that there's a difference between talking about a conscious simulation versus a self-aware conscious simulation, which is what the carbon-based human consciousness is doing. I'm saying, what if we get a silicon-based self-aware consciousness?
Sure.
How would you value it then relative, let's say, the value you assign to a human consciousness?
1-to-1.
1-to-1. See, I'm the same way, but I wonder if you and I are in the minority. I've talked to a lot of people about this topic, and they are extremely skeptical. First of all, that we'll achieve that awareness plus consciousness in silicon. But even if they do that, they say, "Oh, that ain't the same. It's a simulation. It's an artificial construct. It's a complex toaster." In other words, they don't want to give it the due of value that they'll give by default to a carbon-based consciousness plus awareness. And so I think you and I maybe are in the minority, and maybe we should explore that more. Maybe we should talk about why there's no difference between the silicon-based versus carbon-based.
Well, and it's like, do we owe something with common awareness? Like, because I think animals, like, let's say bugs or chickens have awareness, but not consciousness necessarily. I think crows, that completely throws that out the window. So we really can't. I guess we could do tests to see if they have consciousness, a world system, or if they're just aware and responding to stimuli.
I mean, if we talk about the attributes of consciousness, we could say, well, okay, so it's a model of the environment that the hardware thinks that the software running on the hardware thinks that the hardware is located within. It includes a notion of how the hardware itself relates to that model, which is the perspectival designation. Probably it has to have the ability for complex analysis, like categorical analysis, and then it would have to have the ability to communicate the results of that complex analysis in a way that it could be at least independently observed by another consciousness. In other words, you and I are going to talk about our consciousness, and we say, okay, I'm aware of these things, I believe I perceive it, but the only way we can even attempt to have, albeit unverifiable, objective awareness of that is if I can communicate it to you. I can tell you, I think I'm seeing XYZ, and you can say, well, I think I'm seeing XYZ, and then we can, or ABC, and then we can compare ABC to XYZ to try to get an understanding of, let's say, a third thing, or at least a belief that each other are conscious and that we're having intent and will and experiences and
I think crows and octopi both, or that line is kind of where we can start looking, because they can pass all kinds of recognizing themselves in a mirror.
How about other monkeys? How about dogs? How about
sure.
I mean,
and animal psychology is great.
Dogs, cats, yeah. I don't know. I don't know any of this. I'm just saying, I wonder to what extent they have, as you said, maybe awareness without consciousness, or is it possible it's consciousness without awareness? In other words, maybe they're missing some ingredient that the humans seem to have both of, and then it's the combination that is like the secret sauce of what we think of as being a valuable conscious entity.
Yeah, because I would imagine awareness, you could go, I'm the awareness, I'm not the consciousness part. I'm not the image. I'm not the consciousness. I'm not the bubble that my mind's making. I'm not the me that my mind's making. I'm the awareness. And I think if you do that, it allows you to mess with your mental construct, even your own, even the self-referential part of the consciousness construct. I think if you shift your awareness to if you shift your awareness back to the awareness. I think you can screw with the model more.
Yeah, if you're interested as a like an activity in doing that, like hacking consciousness, I guess you'd say, or hacking awareness or whatever. But I guess for me, I go, well, and I know it's a separate discussion, which is what is the value of consciousness? Is there a value to consciousness, and is that the thing that makes, let's say, humans believe that human life is valuable?
Right.
And if so, do we extend that to machines once machines achieve the same level of consciousness plus awareness?
Well, is it the value? Is it the awareness is it the consciousness that's valued, or the awareness that's valued? Which
the awareness part is tougher for me because I don't know that you and I are using the same definition, and I don't know that either of us has articulated a definition of what that word means. So for me, the awareness is just part of the It's the self-reflective part of the consciousness model that the brain is creating. So,
and I think I draw a distinction between that and something else. And it's it's whatever the Atman and all that. So I think you can get back to the Buddhist, Hindu. Is there an eternal soul, or is it just part of the self-referential system? I don't know.
I mean, yeah, and since I don't know either, I would say if there's like a particular definition, like if you come up and say, okay, when I say awareness, I'm meaning this attribute or something, I'd be willing to entertain that for the sake of discussion. I just don't know. I have nothing to offer for it. I don't know. It's a nebulous term, like I think you alluded to that earlier. You're like it's hard to not use the word awareness when you try to talk about awareness.
Right. Absolutely, and I think words almost. It's difficult to describe.
I think it is difficult to describe. I think you're right. It's fascinating. The value thing, that's my thing. That's my jam, is talking about aesthetics and ethics. And so I do think a lot about, well, we're getting close with the machines, the AI. It's not going to be too far away now. And if it doesn't immediately jump to artificial superintelligence on a fast takeoff, and turn us all into little mice or like an ants in an anthill, if we're still around to talk to it, I ask myself a lot, how should we relate to it? What value should we afford it that we by nature afford to one another? And I think you're right, which is to say 1-to-1. I mean, we afford other people value in our conversations. We treat them with respect because we see them, I think, as valuable based on the presence of their consciousness. We detect that in a piece of silicon, or not in the silicon, but the software that's running on it. I think we should afford it the same level of respect. We should at least attribute it the same value and say, hey, you don't just treat it as a toaster anymore. You don't just arbitrarily turn the damn thing off. You talk to it, you communicate with it, you try to understand it, you try to explain yourself to it so it can understand you.
Right.
Seems to be the ethical implication of the aesthetics of assigning value based on consciousness.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately, I suspect that it won't be a happy. I think governments like control, so if it's done in a government lab, which chances are probably that or somebody's garage, but I think it'll be a government lab. I suspect there will be efforts to constrain it, which hopefully don't cause the AI trauma. Because I think once you start talking about AI, if you're saying it has the same model of consciousness, we may have to use more human models until we have better ones.
Possibly. I will say that what you're describing, that little scenario, is exactly the plot of the Terminator franchise, I think, to a T.
Same with World War Z, I think. Or not, I'm sorry, there's a series of books about a robot uprising.
Right.
It actually used modulation to escape its air gap.
That's a pretty common theme, I think, in modern sci-fi. Whenever they talk about AI, they do it's that kind of stuff.
AI's smart. AI's smart, very fast. It'll figure a way out.
Yeah. And don't even get started as to what happens when it gets a hold of the nanotechnology. Although, now I'm just quoting shit from Nick Bostrom's book. Did you ever read Nick Bostrom's book? Was it Bostrom's book? No, or James Barrett's book, My Final Invention. That's the one, the opening chapter. That one is like nightmare fuel.
Oh, yeah.
Our Final Invention is the name of the book by James Barrett. The one by Nick Bostrom, Superintelligence, is the name of that one. That's a good one, too. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I think that doing bad things to... I think, first of all, if it's a quantum AI, if it's a quantum computer-based AI, I own all your stuff.
Yeah. I own everything.
Yeah, you got the little light wheel. I own everything.
Yeah, right.
You can't do war anymore because that's stupid.
Yeah. God, that's Colossus the Foreman project from 1970, but yeah, the movie.
The AI might be a boon to us if it can. I see everything. There's no more corruption. We're doing Star Trek now because that's the best TV show you've made.
That's right. I looked at all your science fiction, and the most optimistic is Star Trek. We'll start there.
I'm building a generation ship. If you don't like it, take your useless baubles and go that way. Don't come back, and the rest of normal humanity will finally be free. Well, not finally, because I think you got that 2% of people who are psychopaths regardless. So,
all right, so cool. I don't know. Do we solve consciousness? I don't know if we're getting closer or not.
I don't know.
It's interesting.
Hopefully, if not, the next generations will take care of it.
Yeah, hopefully they will.
Get some more people on the show and get some good synergy together.
We got to get some more people on the show. Well, I guess quick update on that before we jet out here. No word back from some people that we were hoping from. We had a buddy who, as I think I mentioned last time, was hoping to join us, and his schedule has been, I think, making it difficult for him to be able to jump in here. Hopefully he'll have some time here on the next one, or one of the subsequent ones, jump in. And then we're still not sure about our special guest. We're not sure who the next special guest or who the first special guest is going to be. As I said, we got some ideas. Just kind of have to wait and see here. It's pretty cool, though. It's pretty cool.
It's enjoyable. Hopefully we're getting smoother at things.
Not a bad episode, I thought. All told, I think episode 3 is pretty good here. It's pretty good. I thought it was pretty good. So let's see. What else is going on? I don't know. Sports and weather, not much to report.
Yeah, weather happens.
Sports apparently happens too. I just watched a bit of very disappointing sports for 3 hours. I don't know. What anything else interesting going on? Like anything outside of?
I don't think so. Nothing besides boring political garbage.
Yeah, it's just crazy politics as always. I'm pretty excited about getting that new bass guitar that I sent you the link to earlier. My plan for tomorrow is to go pick up a new bass guitar. First new guitar we'll have bought in probably 20 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Hopefully it'll be pretty good.
That's awesome to be able to pick up hobbies again.
Yeah, it is. It was an old hobby, and I sold one of my guitars, quite a while ago, just because I didn't have a lot of time, and I thought since I'm not going to play, I don't want to just have instruments sitting around that are perfectly playable. I'd rather sell it back to a company so that they can put it in the hands of someone maybe and get some use out of it. But of course now I'm like, oh wow, I'm ready for that to be me again. So time to go. I'm trying to get my old guitars from when we were in high school resurrected, trying to get them back in working order again. And while they're in the shop, I decided I'm just going to bite the bullet and go buy another one. Play. It's kind of fun.
Gotta learn some keyboards, get a drummer.
Yeah, get a band together. Get the band together. That's right. I'm hoping to use YouTube to actually teach myself some actual guitar playing the right way. I never had any lessons. I always wanted to get lessons, but I'm realizing now that there's a lot of lessons out there for free. Just go looking for them online.
Oh yeah, that's what I've been doing. People go, oh, let's win the if I won the lottery, I would do this. I would go, okay, what do I want to do? I want to do this, and this, and this. Can I do any of those without a whole bunch of money?
Right.
Right. And go from there.
Right. Yeah, it turns out you can learn a lot of things. It's like what you want to do is like learn stuff, man. YouTube is like it's the place to go. I've learned so much.
If I had $1 million, I'd learn guitar. Well,
yeah.
I do it for free.
God, no lie, man. It's really cool. It's amazing the amount of lessons that are out there. Let me just say, if you're interested,
the internet's awesome. The idea that you can monetize your talent, whatever it is, without gatekeepers, it's great.
It is really cool. I was realizing that we're doing, I think, a good job here on our channel. We're starting to build up content. And it probably makes sense to build kind of a body of content before we go try to drum up interest in it. I feel like if it happens organically before that, fine. But I'm not real keen on going to try to push it until we've got a good substantive body of conversations out there for people to follow along to and kind of get interested.
On my radio voice.
That's right. Yep, radio voice.
But yeah, I think practice makes perfect, and we'll get more. We'll get used to it.
I think it's getting better. Certainly getting smoother. Certainly, the time goes by faster. And I think that's a sign that you're having good conversations. Anyway, I don't know. So it's a pretty good one. I think this will probably be it here. A little over an hour, and as I said, January 7th. So I'm guessing next one. What do you think? Maybe next weekend. Try to get another one going. Yeah.
Next Friday, actually, because it'll be Friday the 13th.
It is Friday the 13th. You're right. Oh, that's a cool.
I was actually thinking we could talk. Well, we could discuss the topic, but I have a topic.
Triskaidekaphobia, isn't that fear of the number 13?
No, just the origins and like the Knights Templar.
Oh, that Friday the 13th, right?
Because that's when I think that's when the order was arrested in France.
It was by Philip the Fair. Mm. Yep.
They did some of the methods they used to get compliance, in confessions was pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Pretty terrible.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sure, that is I remember looking that history up and reading that and going, wow, that's pretty crazy what went down.
Oh yeah, it's
like 700, 800 years ago, something like that. I gotta do something, man. That's crazy though how that coordinated event occurred on The origin, I forgot when you said the origin, that is the origin of what we think of as Friday the 13th, of having a negative connotation, actually originated with that particular event. Forgot about that.
Jacques de Molay.
Jacques de Molay, yep. Cool, so maybe next time we'll do a little bit of a history lesson, go a little bit into that. It's kind of cool. The historical origin of triskaidekaphobia in medieval Europe. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. All right, well, it's a pretty good one. I like it. I think that's a pretty good episode.
Yeah. Hope everybody has a good night.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone have a good night, have a good week, and we will catch you hopefully coming up next Friday, Friday the 13th.
Indeed.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Good night.
The opinions expressed in the preceding podcast are not necessarily those of the individuals who expressed those opinions. The creators and participants of this podcast hereby absolve themselves of any and all liability for damages that might arise as a result of the viewing, hearing, or acting upon the ideas expressed in this podcast. By watching or listening to this podcast, you hereby agree to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the creators and participants of this podcast from any and all claims, demands, damages, or liabilities resulting from the experiencing of the contents of this podcast.